URC ELA Keystones by Al Cody. For my particular context, in Pennsylvania, which is where I teach, all high schoolers must pass a series of state mandated standardized tests known as the Keystone exams. These exams, which can last up to 5 hours at a time, consist of biology, algebra, and ELA. I personally teach ELA to the grade that takes the Keystone exams, which tests students on reading, writing, and analysis skills through fiction and nonfiction texts. As for the exact demographic that I work with, I teach ELA reading and writing skills to about 25 students of ages 15 to 16 years old in groups of 4 to 6. My specific students have been identified as having severe gaps in their ELA skills and are in danger of falling behind. While my students have specific needs, they do not have IEPs and as such don't receive the support that brings with them, be that case managers, accommodations, etc. in class. The problems that both I and my students face is that A, standardized test preparation, as it stands right now, is not useful for the students after the test is taken. That is to say, it is useful for that moment when the students take the test, but afterwards it has no further use. B, students have a negative mindset around tests and test preparation. There have been many studies that show that students don't value tests like standardized tests, and as a result, their results suffer. And finally, students are not given a proper chance to reflect of their learning and the learning process that they've just taken part in. That is to say, they learn, they study, and then once they are finished with that, they forget it all and don't have time to properly retain and reflect on the information that they have learned. So, my overall goals for this unit are to number one, prepare my students for the Keystones while also teaching them skills to help them succeed in the future. This goal is influenced by the research Timothy Shanahan did, in which he found out that tests, specifically standardized tests, are more about being able to read and take a test rather than what you know. My second goal is to change students' mindsets around standardized tests. Crystal McCutcheon says that students with better mindsets tend to not only get better scores on these standardized tests, but also have a slower decline on these test scores over students with more negative or fixed mindsets. In order to achieve these goals, I have three aspects of creativity that I want to introduce to this unit that I hope will help increase student learning and student results on the Keystone exams. The first activity is a crossword creation activity in which students will create crossword puzzles for each other using Keystone terms and then will trade these puzzles with each other to solve. This activity is based around Paper's ideas of constructionism. Next, I will have students create practice tests for each other where they will research, create, take, and reflect upon practice Keystone exams. This idea is influenced by Piaget's ideas of constructivism and Freire's ideas of critical pedagogy. Finally, I will have a journal reflection activity in which students will take part in a share tracker in which they will log the results from a number of test prep activities and then reflect upon their performances in short journal entries. This activity, again, is influenced by constructivism and critical pedagogy. Now I'm going to go a little bit more in depth into each of my creativity creations. As previously mentioned, my first activity is a crossword creation activity. To start off, students will be given a list of the most common terms that are asked about in the ELA Keystone. They will choose 7 words from this list to create their crossword puzzle and use the definitions of the words as the clues for people to solve the crossword puzzle. Now, this is where it begins to deviate. If a student feels creative or feels like they want to do this, then they can make the crossword puzzle themselves, putting out the tiles in each space where they want them. If a student does not feel creative or does not feel confident in their ability to make a crossword by hand, they will be given access to a crossword puzzle generator in which they will enter these words in and it will spit out the actual puzzle. Finally, these students will then trade their crossword puzzles with their classmates and attempt to solve them as quick as they can. This A gamifies a activity that may seem boring like vocabulary review, but it also B works with the ideas of constructionism. That is to say, this entire activity is all about students making and creating and synthesizing rather than just memorizing vocabulary terms via flashcards or studying. Now, my second creation is probably the most ambitious out of the three. In this activity, students would be asked to create a practice keystone test. What this would look like is that first, students would take some time to look at a number of previous Keystone modules to get an idea of how the tests are written and really put themselves in the mindset of what a test writer is doing and how they create these tests. Second, students would be split into smaller groups in their already small groups of 6. I imagine this would look like 3 groups of 2 students working on different portions of this practice keystone, in which one group might choose the reading excerpt that the test would have to be based on. Another group would write the multiple choice questions that the test would ask. And the final group would create the constructive response question, which is an open ended question at the end of the module. Finally, students would then trade their practice modules with other small groups. Each of them would then take these practice modules, trade them back, and give each other feedback on A, their performance, and B, their counterparts' creation. This activity really works with embodied thinking. That is to say, it makes students empathize and makes them do. It puts them in a new situation where they are the test writers and they have to imagine that they're the test writers while also acting and creating the tests. This activity really draws from Piaget's idea of constructivism, in which a student is only really learning when they're changing their schemas or their ideas about something. And the main goal of this activity is to change students' preconceived notions about what tests are about and how to take and pass tests. Additionally, this draws from Freire's critical pedagogy, in which students are asked to be critical thinkers and think deeply about why things are the way they are. And I hope that students take a look at this activity and get time to reflect and think and critically think about why tests are the way they are. And finally, the last creativity creation I would have my students work with is a series of journal reflections activities. I have created an exemplar below to really show how I imagine this would be done. What it would look like is that each student would be given a copy of the same Google Sheets in which they would be able to keep track of their score, whether they grew or not, and a reflection section for each of the activities we do to prepare them for the Keystone. The real piece of this is the reflection, in which I would require 2 to 3 sentences per activity reflecting on if they grew, why they might not have grown, and what they might try differently next time. The main purpose of this activity is to have students metacognate and reflect on their performance and testing in general. This really works with, again, those constructivism and culture critical pedagogies idea that I was talking about previously, really getting them to change their perspective and idea of what tests look like, how to take them, and what their growth really looks like. Now, I'd like to take a second and focus on the data that I'm hoping to collect through these activities. All right. Primarily, I'm hoping to collect data around the mindsets that students have on testing. Particularly, I want to collect data with the mindset that students who have a good mindset in regards to standardized testing both do better in tests and show growth. And so the main way I hope to do that is through the share tracker. All right. The shared tracker will not only show the movement of students' achievement in preparation activities, but also the quality of their reflections. And of course, I want my students to do well on these standardized tests. And so I'm hoping to see improvement on the exam results. Historically, my students have not done well, medium to poor typically, on their first attempts in the Keystone. And so I'm hoping to see improvement in the rate of first time passes. So, my final takeaways from this entire process is that students are likely going to always have to take standardized tests. As a result, the best way to utilize these standardized tests and the preparation that we have to give students for them is to take the time and integrate activities and processes that will help prepare students for the future. This is going to look like giving them critical thinking skills, reflective skills, and changing their mindsets around how to solve problems. This has been my URC unit renovation creation. I hope you enjoyed it and I hope it was useful for you.